You know, if you've flown anytime recently, there's a really good chance you were on an Airbus A320. But here's something you probably didn't know. There's a huge global safety effort happening right now to fix a hidden danger deep inside its structure. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that story and see what it tells us about the invisible systems that keep us all safe up there. It sounds like a bit of a weird question, right? But the answer? Well, it involves some incredibly precise engineering and just constant watchfulness. And when even a potential weakness is found in that system, it triggers a massive worldwide response. And that is exactly what we're digging into today. All right, so let's start with the problem itself. This isn't about something you can just see with the naked eye. We're talking about a threat that grows slowly, silently, and completely out of sight. What this all boils down to is something called metal fatigue. See, reports started trickling in about these tiny, almost invisible cracks forming on a really crucial part of the plane structure. These are not the kind of things a pilot spots during a walk-around check. They're deep inside the airframe. So, what is this part? It's called the keel beam, and honestly, the best way to picture it is as the airplane's spine running right along its belly. Now, one of the main jobs of this spine is to be a super solid anchor for the parts that hold the main landing gear doors on. And that means the keel beam is under enormous stress every single flight. And here's how the problem starts. Every single flight. I mean, every takeoff, every bit of pressurization at altitude, every landing, it all puts stress on the plane's body. Now, do that thousands of times, and eventually a microscopic crack can form on those fittings. And if you leave it unchecked, that tiny crack gets just a little bit bigger with every single flight. And that brings us to the absolute worst case scenario. If that crack grows big enough, the fitting could fail completely. And that means a main landing gear door could literally detach from the plane while it's in the air. That could cause huge aerodynamic problems, or even hit the tail or an engine. This is exactly the kind of thing, a low probability but super high consequence event, that safety agencies work around the clock to prevent. So, with a danger like that on the table, what happens next? Well, this is when the entire global aviation safety system kicks into high gear, and that leads to an official, mandatory order. And here it is. This is the official response. Airworthiness Directive 2025-0189. And when a directive like this comes out, it is not a suggestion. It's a legally binding order for every single airline that flies these planes, period. Now, what's really fascinating here is that word supersedes. It shows you that safety isn't a one-and-done thing. It's always evolving. See, there was already an earlier directive from the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, or EASA. But as they got more data, they realized they needed even stricter checks. So this new directive reflects the very latest and best understanding of the risk. And the scope of this is just massive. It covers the entire A32 family, all the models you see here. This isn't some small niche problem. We're talking about thousands of planes that are the workhorses of airlines all over the world. The only exception? Planes that have already had a specific structural upgrade, which is known as Modification 165315. Okay, so a directive is issued, but what does that actually mean for the airlines? You know, for the mechanics and technicians on the ground, what do they physically have to go and do? Well, the heart of the directive is this: repetitive inspections. And the key thing to understand here is that time isn't measured in days or months, it's measured in flight cycles, which is just one takeoff and one landing. The first inspection has to be done by the time a plane hits 3,000 cycles. And after that, as you can see, they have to keep doing those checks every couple thousand cycles or so, depending on the specific part. So airlines are basically at a fork in the road here. They have two main options. They can commit to this long-term cycle of inspections forever. That's cheaper upfront, but it means you're constantly pulling planes out of service. Or they can do a one-time terminating modification, basically a permanent structural fix that solves the problem for good. That costs a lot more upfront, but then you're done. It's a huge strategic and financial decision for every single airline. And that decision, you can bet, sends a massive ripple effect across the entire industry. It impacts everything from flight schedules all the way down to the company's bottom line. And this chart just lays it out perfectly. You've got the direct costs, right? The money for the inspections themselves, or for the big modification. But honestly, the real killer here is often aircraft downtime. Every single hour a plane is sitting in a hangar for an unscheduled check is an hour it's not in the air making money. For both the airlines and the companies that lease them the planes, this all has to get factored in. And believe me, the clock started ticking almost immediately. The directive became effective just 2 weeks after it was issued. Now, the first deadline for any individual airplane depends on how old it is and how many cycles it's flown, but the planning for this massive logistical puzzle had to start on day one to keep planes from being grounded. So let's just zoom out for a second. Because while a story about cracks in a plane can sound a little alarming, it's actually a perfect example of the proactive safety system working exactly the way it's supposed to. I love this because it really gets to the heart of it. Safety isn't some destination you arrive at. It's this constant, endless cycle. Engineers find a potential problem, analysts figure out the risk, and then regulators order fixes that get rolled out all over the world.
And a critical part of this whole cycle is data. Every time a mechanic does one of these inspections, everything they find or don't find gets reported back. All that information feeds a global database, helping Airbus and EASA make their safety models even better, predict future issues, and ultimately make the entire fleet safer for all of us.
So, in the end, this one single directive tells a much bigger story. It's just one piece of a vast, invisible network of rules and people all dedicated to safety. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other hidden systems, what other unseen checks and balances are quietly working in the background every single time you step onto a plane?